edition of Thursday Thoughts. This is about career and identity intersections, with our topic being on LGBTQ+. My name's Cassie. I'll be moderating today, and we'll go ahead and get started. Before we start with our panelists answering some questions for us and introducing themselves, we're going to go through some virtual communal agreements. So the first one is, please everyone mute your microphone, participants and panelists included. Panelists will unmute their microphone when they're speaking. For some reason, if they forget to unmute their microphone and I see them talking, I'll just chime in and say, hey, remember to unmute your mic. Secondly, if you would like to catch every word that our wonderful panelists are saying today, feel free to turn your closed captioning on at the bottom of the screen. So there's a panel across the bottom. You can click the turn on closed captioning and it'll allow you to pick up any words that the panelists and myself are saying. Thirdly, you may keep your video on or off as participants, but our presenters or our panelists will be using both audio and video today. Please ask your questions via the chat function so that everyone can see them. Please do not turn your microphone on to ask any questions, participants. Just drop them in the chat and I'll go ahead and prompt accordingly. Last but not least, we will be, are recording this presentation and sharing it on the UNLV Career Services website and social media. It's on our YouTube channel and available for you to view later as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and actually introduce myself real quick. So my name's Cassie. I'm a career coach at UNLV Career Services. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart because I am also a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, along with our panelists today, which is really great. So let's go ahead and meet them. Panelists, we're going to go ahead and start with Peter. If you could answer the questions, where do you work? What is your role? What does your day-to-day look like? And any other information that'll be helpful for us today. So Peter, go ahead and kick us off.
Hello, thank you, Kathy.
Oh boy.
I'm Peter Starkey, and I work at a small mental health nonprofit called Monadnock Peer Support, and I serve as the executive director. And for day to day, it changes every single day, especially in a COVID world. But sort of serving in that upper management level role, it's a lot of different oversight for programming, for finance, for HR, for strategic vision of the agency, figuring out what we're doing as a board, fundraising, all of that fun stuff with a nonprofit. So really every day is different, but always sort of figuring out what are we doing at a high level for the agency to move forward and to achieve its mission. And anything else? Oh, my pronouns are he, him, his. Probably important. And I'm gonna swing it over to Taylor.
Thank you, Peter. Hey, everyone. My name is Taylor Michels. I work at CenturyLink, a Fortune 500 technology company in the United States and all over the world as well. I work as an analyst in the consumer marketing organization. So a lot of what I do is preparing reports, curating data that we receive on a daily basis, and put together, like I said, reports, charts, whatever is needed for me to pass on to higher up leadership to help them make decisions and drive the business forward. And I'll go to Kat. Oh, also he, him, his. Kat.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kat Claus, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And I am also the program manager for the Wisconsin LGBT Chamber of Commerce. The Wisconsin LGBT Chamber of Commerce is a statewide organization, obviously located in Wisconsin. Because we were businesses across the state. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 750 member businesses across the entire state. So my everyday looks a little bit different. I do a lot of traveling for work. A lot of what I do in COVID times is I sit down and do grant consultations with businesses and help them if they need to find somebody with social media expertise or a lawyer who can work through the legalities of opening during COVID. I also do business consultations, and we do different leadership groups in the state with different age ranges. So some days of the week, obviously pre-COVID, I sometimes drive up to 4 hours a day to do the work that I need to do.
Wonderful. Thank you to the three of you for introducing yourself. Our last panelist couldn't make it today. My pronouns are she, her, hers as well. So thank you for getting us kicked off, and let's go ahead and transition to the next set of questions. So these questions are related to career trajectory. The two questions that I have for you today are, what has your career path looked like so far? And what would you say is one mistake that you've made in your career journey, and what did you learn from it? And we're going to go ahead and begin with Taylor.
Ooh, Okay. Um, Graduating out of college, originally stayed for an extra year and worked on my master's of business administration. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way because I knew from talking to people it would be more difficult to go back and do it after establishing a career. So I wanted to go ahead and get that out of the way. And in the business world, it is a good thing to have in your back pocket as a way to get yourself in the door when you don't have the experience, which is still something I had to deal with whenever I was first job hunting. My career path itself, I started as an account executive at Gannett, which is a media company that has different newspapers across the country, and me no like sales. I was not a fan and just dealing with certain people in my area and trying to convince them to move toward digital advertising. That was a challenge in itself. From there, I started at CenturyLink as an analyst 1. I've since become an analyst 2 and have taken on more responsibility at my current position. One mistake that I've made in my career journey, I think I'll still make it to this day, and it's something I'm still working on, and something I think a lot of people still deal with, is being afraid to ask questions and ask for help. Like, I'm one of those ones, I don't want to seem like I can't handle my job. I don't want to ever show signs of weakness. So just actually reaching out to my manager and saying, hey, I'm overwhelmed. Can you help me? Like, every single time I've said it, it's helped. It's been a good conversation for my manager and I to have, and I don't know why. I just can't do it without asking. And since Kat's missing, I'll throw it over to Peter.
Oh, thanks, Taylor. My career path has been really interesting. Like I said, I currently work in mental health, but I went to school for international affairs. And right out of that, I went and worked for an international nonprofit called the School for International Training, which does educational programs abroad, a lot of undergraduate study abroad programs with different partner universities around the country. And I specifically started in admissions. I focused on Europe and Asia. And then about a year later, I was promoted to the student affairs team, where I oversaw global health and safety for all of our programs. And through that work, working in student affairs, it started out where probably about 20% of my job focused on mental health, but increasingly, by the time that I left, mental health became such an important thing within higher education that it took up to 80% of my job. And I was not a clinician. I did not go to school for psychology. I did not plan to go get a master's in any sort of psychological field. So I really looked at non-clinical alternatives to mental health in order to better serve my students. Because we only had, even as a global institution, we only had one psychologist on staff for over 1,000 students. And I found that we just were not serving our students appropriately. Specifically, I found a subsection of mental health called peer support, which is a non-clinical, non-medical alternative and also complement to the clinical system. And kind of tied with one mistake is that I didn't advocate for really a lot of professional development that I think could have served me in my job. I really wanted to get the trainings that I now have in my new position, but I didn't push for that in my previous job. I kind of was like, oh, well, I'm lucky to have this job and I'm not going to push too hard, even though this is going to make me better at my job. So I'll combine that with the career trajectory question. From there, this position opened up of being the executive director. I was 25 at the time. And I've broke every single rule that you do in an application. I submitted a 5-page cover letter outlining all of the ways that they could do a better job. And for some reason, they hired me. And it's been a really wonderful experience, already shifting career paths in my mid-20s. But definitely was the right move to make. I'm going to do another mistake since I combined with the previous question. One of the biggest mistakes that I have made, specifically when I was promoted in my last organization, but I know that a lot of people getting out of college or early in their career, is knowing your worth and doing your research on salary and benefits. I did not do the research when I was promoted, and I was severely underpaid from the previous person. And then my previous team got a bonus added to their salaries. Even though I was taking on more work, I was not being compensated for that. And that's coming from my identity as a white male. It's even harder in this world if you are female, if you are transgender or transsexual, if you are a person of color. So that's something where knowing your worth and advocating for your worth and also supporting your colleagues when it comes to that is incredibly important. And being able to do the research, asking the questions that have kind of been ingrained in us, like don't ask what you make or don't ask what the other person makes. I'm going to use my French here because I took 4 years of French. That's bullshit. It's a way. Hand it over to Kat now. Thanks, Kevin.
I was muted there. Hi, so my career path was a lot like Peter's. So I got a bachelor's in education at Northern Michigan University, and I was kind of that student who wanted to do it all. I think when I was done, I had 2 majors and 2 minors. When I finally got out the door 6 whole years later after I started. So I think that that was my first mistake because I kind of wanted to do everything and I didn't realize that I didn't necessarily need to major or minor in something to have the career that I wanted. So my career path after graduating with my bachelor's in education, I went and did some teaching for a while. I was a college and career counselor outside of Flint, Michigan, and I doing
Has Kat frozen for everyone else too?
Yeah, she is for me.
Okay. Well, on that note, I'm hoping she can hear me say that she has frozen. Kat, if you can hear me, go ahead and turn your video off. That often improves connection. And then also leave the meeting room and come back, and then we'll hopefully let you finish off this response. But in the meantime, while you get that figured out, it looks like Gianni has actually joined us today, who is another one of our panelists. So Gianni, if you wouldn't mind hopping in and just introducing yourself really quick, and then answering these questions while we wait for Kat to figure out her connection. Gianni, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So go ahead and take it away.
Because I did not read. What were the questions?
The questions, so just quickly introduce yourself, like what you do, that sort of thing. And then what has your career path looked like so far? And then what would you say is one mistake you've made in your career journey?
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, my name's Gianni. I currently am an administrative assistant for the nursing department for intensive care for Banner Health in one of the major hospitals here in the Phoenix area. Specialties in neuro intensive care as well as cardiovascular intensive care. I went to NAU. That's how I met Kevin. No NAU. Went there for 4 years, and then afterwards decided to jump into nursing school after that. Did that whole route, and I kind of flipped back and forth between like bedside stuff and administrative stuff. Right now, due to the COVID health crisis, we're severely short-staffed, so we are somewhat doing double duty for a lot of stuff. Like all the admin people are kind of stepping in and taking assignments for people just because all of our nurses were severely burnt out. We're tired, and in Arizona, we're actually seeing a major spike in cases. So we fortunately are getting a lot of them. For me, I would say for my career path, I've kind of jumped all over the place. I kind of had the I don't know what I want to do kind of business go on my entire career path. I started off working for Residence Life at NAU, and I really liked the aspect of being a leader, which was nice. And then I got into retail after that, and then after that, I kind of soon realized I was like, okay, like I like to manage, but I don't think this is necessarily my route. And then that's when I kind of just was like, you know what, let's try, nursing school and see how that goes. So, yeah, and that's where I'm at now, basically.
Great.
And
Thank
for
oh,
mistake,
go ahead.
sorry, I forgot the
Yeah, good.
one mistake I feel I kind of doubted myself a lot when it came to my capabilities as well as my aptitude from what I know that I'm capable of, as opposed to what my assumption is of what others expect of me. So I feel like there are times that I have kind of lowered my own expectations for a lot of stuff within my own practice to kind of fit in somewhere, just because I wanted to like fit in that certain, group, and like being a queer man of color, it kind of just really, like I didn't utilize my diversity to my advantage to show what other aptitudes that I actually hold. So that would probably be one of the biggest mistakes that I made when it came to my whole career path.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gianni.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for hopping in. And then Kat, did you want to finish up your thought on career trajectory? Or do you want us to just move on to the next set of questions and you can hop in there?
Yeah, just quickly I don't know how much that cut off, but one mistake that I made, just to summarize it really quickly, is if you heard me, I got a degree in education and I love teaching, but when I was looking for jobs, I really limited myself from amazing careers because they didn't have education in the title, because they weren't so closely related to what I studied in college. And what I found is that for the most part, employers like knowing that you have experience. It's not as much as the exact title of what you got your degree in. So I think that my career path would have been better in some ways if I didn't limit myself.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kat. We caught all of that, so that's great. Let's go ahead and transition. Oh, maybe not. I don't know. Okay. So let's go ahead and transition to the next set of questions. Thank you all panelists. Those were really great responses. We're going to shift gears here to talk a little bit more about employer dynamics. So the first is, how has your identity impacted the type of employer that you work for? If so, how? And secondly, how do you navigate workplace politics? Does your identity determine how you show up? And we'll go ahead and start with Gianni. And then Gianni, you'll just go ahead and pass it to someone else. You can say Peter, Kat, or Taylor. Yeah.
Okay. So for me, my identity has kind of impacted who I work for, just because I really look at company standards when it comes to the types of diversity that they have. So Banner Health actually has an initiative that's called Here for Everyone, and they have their own diversity and inclusion like department within the corporate system. I'm actually part of the LGBTQ aspect of that. So last year they walked Pride Parade and stuff like that. So I kind of really look for places that are very diverse, not only for like types of people, but just also different practices, I guess you could say. I have always really enjoyed the environment here at my facility, especially just because everyone here is very accepting, very kind of laid back, and very open-minded, to the sense of everyone kind of treats each other with respect, which is really nice. Workplace politics. I feel like workplace politics isn't necessarily, well, especially for me here, it's not necessarily an identity kind of thing. It's more so like, what is your position within within the system here? So like for us, it's always like bedside versus corporate, which is always the biggest kind of thing. So anytime they roll out a new initiative or anytime they roll out something new, like a new policy or something, all of us are like, why? Like, what are you doing now? Like, what's the issue now? So it's more so like bedside against, it's like bedside against the above kind of thing. And we have like really, really good leaders and leadership here, especially in my department. My director, she actually covers 4 intensive care units. So she kind of has her hands full. And out of all of the minutes, she tries to make sure that we all feel supported, which is probably the most important part. Because there's a lot of companies out there that, you know, are like, here, you're working, enjoy. And here they're like, hey, we would really enjoy you to work. What can we do for you, kind of thing. And that's kind of the culture that they have set here in my facility from what I know. But as a whole, I feel like corporately, they handle themselves very well, especially like right now. It was kind of like a trial time for us to see like, okay, how are they gonna treat us, kind of thing. And it hasn't been terrible. They actually really stepped up and made sure that we're like safe, we're protected, we have what we need. And if we have like different resources for when it comes to like if we're suffering for burnout or if we are like impacted by COVID-19 in any other way. So that's kind of where our dynamic is here at my hospital.
Wonderful. And let's go ahead and transition over to Peter.
Okay, got to turn off the mute. Yes. In a way, I am way up in New Hampshire, which is one of the whitest states in the union. It's also the middle of nowhere, so being a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, it's hard to find others within our community. I went from massive multinational organization to tiny little regional nonprofit. But the type of employer is really, I've always focused on a very inclusive culture. And both organizations that I've worked for post-college have been rooted really in some sort of social justice cause or aspect. So absolutely, identity has played a part in the sense that I want to work somewhere where I feel comfortable. I don't necessarily want to work somewhere that has an incredibly toxic culture. And I've focused a lot on that in the interview questions, specifically in asking, what is the company culture like? So that's been important to me because I also want to be able to bring my full authentic self. Navigating workplace politics, those are fun. When you're in a large multinational organization, the politics, it can get very divisive and toxic. And it's kind of, especially in larger companies, builds this sort of system that you're kind of trying to compete to like defend your job. So a lot of finger pointing where it was kind of like, well, what does that person even do? What does that person even do? What is their job? So it was always kind of like this defensive thing of like, I work. And sometimes you'd kind of see a little pattern when it came to identity groups, where a certain identity group, and it was something that really frustrated me a lot with this previous organization, would almost get that not direct like discrimination, but it was like that hidden comments that would be made about the productivity of, oh, those people. Or if you're, as I was, a gay male, it was like pigeonholed into this, oh, well, all of you really like to dance. And I was like, oh, I don't really like to dance, but okay. And navigating that was difficult. But it also meant that you had to be ready to kind of stand up to that, and stand up for yourself, but also stand up for your colleagues and be able to call people into conversations that sort of look at that bias and that introspection. Being at a super small nonprofit now, one of the great things about being the boss is that you kind of get to curate the culture. And I know that my lived experience when it comes to my experience with mental health, with being a member of the LGBTQ community, absolutely brings in my priorities to be an inclusive culture. So making sure that all of the voices around the table are being heard. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it to Kat.
I would say that my identity has absolutely impacted the type of employer I work for. I've had some really great employers who are inclusive, and I've had employers where I was teaching where I was asked to not mention my girlfriend at the time. So I've kind of had that entire spectrum of experiences. What this did is it impacted the type of places that I started to apply for. One thing that I always look for is an inclusive non-discrimination statement. That is my tip to all of you. What that basically is just that thing that says so-and-so employer does not discriminate or identity. Obligation that employers have to follow that. Can everybody still hear me okay?
You cut out a little bit, but you came back, so we can hear you now.
Perfect. And how do I navigate workplace politics? Well, I work for a very small employer. We have a staff of 4. So navigating workplace politics is sometimes easier in a small business. I personally like it, but it's harder in other ways. So if there is a disagreement, it's somebody you work really, really closely with. So I found that creating those great open lines of communication in a smaller workplace is so much more important in the beginning. And does my identity determine how I show up? I think it absolutely does. And trying to
So is Kat frozen for everyone again too? Okay, Peter, thanks for the head nod. Well, let's
Take over.
Yeah, let's go ahead and have Taylor jump in. Kat, go ahead and enter back in without video, and that might help. Yeah, she's left. Okay, Taylor, go ahead and take this question, and then hopefully we can get things remedied.
Okie dokie. As far as my identity impacting my employer, I made sure when I was doing my initial job hunts, I was looking at any company's discrimination policies, looking at just anything in the language that protected me being gay or anything else. Even past that, I wanted to make sure that I was working for a company that was tolerant of people of all walks of life. And I was very thankful that CenturyLink, before my state, before the country even had these anti-discrimination laws on their job postings. Like, that was such an important thing to make me feel like I could walk into the building and feel accepted, because I live in a very conservative area. So seeing a company like that adopt that thinking is incredible in this area. As far as workplace politics, I actually struggle with this question because I don't consider workplace politics that often because my office really doesn't have them, if that makes sense. A lot of what we do is very collaborative. In my organization, we have different teams that handle different aspects that eventually lead to one singular goal toward the end. So our culture is very collaborative in that effort, and we collaborate with other organizations within our larger consumer organization that includes different offices across the country in Arizona, in Kansas, in Colorado. So just looking at my cube, and well, not now because of COVID, but looking around my office and seeing the different faces, seeing men and women working together, seeing people of color working with people who are part of the LGBTQIA community, just seeing all that diversity and knowing at a more macro level that diversity is all across my company just makes me feel a lot safer.
Awesome. I think we all answered this question. And Kat, thanks for joining again. And I don't know if your video is on right now because I can't see your little thing, but go ahead and turn your video off and just keep audio, and we'll go ahead and transition, and I'll let you kick off our next set of questions. So these questions are related to challenges and support. So the two questions that I have for you as panelists today are going to be, what have been some challenges that you faced or are currently facing as it relates to identifying as a member of the LGBTQ plus community? And secondly, what is something that your current employer does well as it relates to diversity and inclusion? So Kat, if you can hear us, I'm going to go ahead and have you kick this question off.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize for my technical difficulties. I faced a few different challenges being a member of the LGBTQ community. The number one would probably be the fear when you welcome there. Apply for jobs, they would have these big posters that featured diversity, people of different color, talking about how inclusive they are, and then I would get there and I found out that that was nothing but a marketing campaign. So one of the biggest professional challenges that I faced is helping my employer understand what true inclusivity means. True inclusivity isn't just that everybody has a seat at the table. It means that everybody feels comfortable speaking while in a meeting, that everybody feels that their voice is being heard. Something that my current employer does that relates to diversity and inclusion is we seek out those diverse voices. And not only do we invite them to the table, we give them those opportunities to speak, and we do frequent check-ins to see if we are doing what is true inclusion. And that is all for me. Do you want me to pass it over to Taylor?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you, Kat. For me, some of the challenges I faced when I first started working at my company was just that initial, am I actually safe here? Like, yes, the company says they're not going to discriminate, but I know the area I'm in. Do the people around here truly accept me, or they just tolerate my existence without actually saying anything negative? And once I got more comfortable with the people I was around and connecting with the employee resource group that is there for the LGBTQ plus community, those two things together made me feel much more comfortable, and I started being more myself. I wasn't just wearing khakis and a polo every day. Like, I was wearing my floral print shirts, I was wearing my bright chinos, just actually dressing how I normally dress and not fearing judgment for it. Something that my current employer does well is they embrace diversity at every turn. We have a diversity and inclusion steering committee that is comprised of different executives and different members of our company that look at the company itself, analyze our current state of being, and figuring out ways that we can improve our culture, improve our diversity, and make sure everyone feels like they truly belong. They host a diversity, inclusion, and belonging week every year. And one of the great things with that is all of the employee resource groups that we have. So we have one for LGBTQ people. We have Women's Empowered. We have Association of Black Technology Professionals. We have Voice of Many Feathers for Native American individuals. We have PAN for our Asian American Network. friends, for anyone with any kind of disability. All the groups come together and we work together to do service projects for the week. We work together to promote one another, to make sure the newer ones, like the millennial one we just started, making sure that everyone feels like, if they don't feel part of the majority, that they have a spot at the table that they can go to and connect with like-minded people and feel safe. I'll pass it over to Gianni.
Okay. So, sorry. So some challenges I feel like I have. I haven't faced a lot in my with my employer. It's more so been my patients, believe it or not. We do take care of people from all walks of life. There have been a few instances where there have been patients that haven't want me to take care of them because of my color, and then there have been patients that didn't want me to care for them because, I'm obviously, not the most, straight acting thing out there. So they're like, no, I don't want. And it's like, look, dude, I'm not here to get on all that. I'm here to, make sure you don't kick the bucket. So let's just make it through this 12 hours. That's probably the biggest issue that I feel like I have had. And very similar to the other gentleman, I think it was you, Taylor. We too have a diversity and inclusion group within the Benner Health system, which is really nice. I don't know, they do tons of activities all over. They don't really specify just specifically to one facility, but they do really cater to all different types of people that would be within our system. I'm not necessarily sure what all they have. I know about the LGBTQ one that was started 2 years ago. It was very new, and I feel like there were enough people that actually every year we have a voice survey, and it's like a survey for the employees that really it's basically like what do you like, what do you not like, what can we change, and there were a lot of people that said that they need something that includes diversity, inclusivity, stuff like that. So I think that was a product of everyone kind of just voicing their opinion and saying, hey, we need something like this. And I think the LGBTQ plus organization was actually one of the first ones to kind of actually come to fruition, which is really cool. But yeah, so that's what my system kind of has in place right now currently.
And then lastly, Peter, do you want to go ahead and tackle these questions?
I'm on mute. Sorry.
You're good.
I was saying that thankfully, and I'm really fortunate that I haven't necessarily had to deal with big challenges. A lot of microaggressions, a lot of assumptions, which are hard to deal with. In my last job, it was kind of, oh, there's this trans student who wants to go to Jordan. Can you talk with them? And it's like, okay, I'm a gay male. I am not trans. I do not know the experience. What? But kind of it was like, oh, you're the LGBTQ person. We're just gonna send them to you. I have been really fortunate, actually, up until recently. Every supervisor that I have had has been a member of the LGBT community. So that's been a really great privilege to be able to talk about some of the issues that I face when it comes to my identity and being in the workplace. So I've been really fortunate in that regard. Like I said, just some microaggressions, a lot of people that do not understand, and I have to educate them, which is exhausting. But I honestly have been really privileged in that regard. My current employer, being as I lead the organization, I hope that I am at least doing the best that we can. I find that frequently in my part of the country, again, I talked about New Hampshire really white, really rural. So it's diversity is like, oh, it doesn't exist, so let's not talk about it. And thankfully, I've had an incredibly diverse staff when it comes to racial identity, sexuality, gender, ability, and that's been really unique when it comes to our area. But also the fact that we don't just sit by and go, oh, just because there's a lot of white people and there's a lot of straight people doesn't mean that we don't do anything. And actually, just yesterday, I sent an email to my board outside of our board meeting, and I was just like, hey, like our staff and our members are talking about the fact that we should really be doing more for the Juneteenth holiday coming up. And here's what this holiday is about if you don't know. And I'm requesting that we add it to our list of recognized days of observance that we do. We don't have anything that really goes off of the federal holidays, which are whitewashed and very Christian. And it was a unanimous decision from the entire board that they wanted to add that. And we've really been supporting our members and also encouraging staff that this is, and it's not going to be like, oh, this is a day when we barbecue. That it's really a day of action. It's a day of reflection. It's a day of organizing. And it's really awesome that our board was open to that idea of offering that paid day so that staff are able to participate in these activities without having to worry about their paycheck being affected. For those of you who haven't met Bobo, this is my cat Bobo. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists, for sharing. I know challenges aren't always the easiest to talk about, but I do appreciate all of your perspectives and experiences. We're going to go ahead and transition to the last set of questions, which are related to advice. So you are welcome to answer any of these questions or just give overall a piece of advice. But the questions that I have prompted for you are, while this session may primarily focus on LGBTQ plus identities, which of your other identities are important when considering your career trajectory? And or secondly, what are some pieces of advice that you have for navigating the workforce as it relates to your most important identities? So I'll go ahead and start us off with Gianni.
Perfect. So part of my other identities that I kind of consider when I'm looking at like a career trajectory would probably be culture and background, like Middle Eastern, Black, and just kind of being a prime example within all the communities that I kind of identify with, and just making sure that the voices that I represent have that same voice within the healthcare system that I'm currently involved with. And then I would probably say when navigating your workforce, look for anything when you apply. So if you get like a weird feeling like maybe I'm not the most comfortable here, then that's always go with your gut. And that's especially in nursing, they always say go with your gut because you're most likely right. So always look for who has like the most accepting environment, and you'll really get the vibe off of like your interview. You'll know if your leader is going to be one to be like, yeah, no, you're welcome to be yourself here. Here, everyone is totally able to be themselves, which is really nice. And we have some really great leadership here in all the different departments, especially the non-nursing departments, that kind of have a very well-rounded staff that are very just outstanding at what they do. So I would really just look at there's some, I think it was Kat that said like non-disclosure. So if they have like a non-discriminatory disclosure, that'd be something to really look for too. So yeah, that would be my advice, is to just kind of look for where you feel comfortable and go with your gut, because you'll most likely be right 10 out of 10 times.
Great, thank you. We'll go ahead and transition over to Kat.
Sorry, I had myself muted again. My identities when I'm considering my career trajectory, I kind of try to consider them all. I'm more than just a queer person. I'm also a first generation college student, and there is so many good parts of everybody. And I would just caution students to just focus on one part of themselves. You should be able to find a job that satisfies most of all the things you're looking for. I know there's nowhere perfect. And my advice when it comes to navigating the workforce as it relates to my most important identities, although employers are not allowed to ask, something I did when I was young is I would always purposefully bring up my partner, who at the time was a woman. And I did that because I would rather find out in a job interview that they were uncomfortable with who I was than after I had accepted a job, turned down other job offers, and were, I don't want to say stuck in that job, but had invested a lot of time into an employer who wouldn't accept me for all parts that I am. So there are some creative ways to mention that up. You don't have to, come out here. I mean, you can come with a rainbow flag, totally your decision. But there are creative ways to look at the inclusivity. My other advice is there are websites like actually rate employers on being inclusivity. It's like a rate my professor, but for employers. And anytime I apply for a job, I look up the company, small or big, and I look at their Google reviews, because when an office isn't welcoming, when it's not a happy workplace, there's usually signs. And that is all I have.
Wonderful, thanks. Taylor?
Okay. Well, for me, I'm very honored to, honored is not a good word, but I recognize my privilege that being LGBTQ is my main identity as far as deviating from the norm. I am white, I am a man, I will even say I'm potentially straight passing if it comes to, I'm not, well, I have the blue hair now, so maybe not so much right now. But I recognize that I do have the ability to I have the responsibility to make a change in my community and my company. I need to be that person that speaks up for anybody that feels like they're not represented. Like, I need to just be there and be at the table. One of the things that really helped me when I first started at my company that I didn't mention earlier, my first interview was it wasn't just with my manager like I thought it was going to be. It was with the entire team I was going to be working with. And one of the things that instantly made me feel more comfortable was one of the members of the team was gay. Like, just seeing another gay man on the team made me instantly feel like, okay, sign one, I can be myself. And just being present and showcasing everything the company has to offer for diversity, I think is such an important thing for us to do. As far as advice for anyone navigating the workforce, I think just find the confidence in yourself. If you're confident with yourself and you're confident enough to be yourself with people, that authenticity is the best thing you can bring to any relationship, whether it be work or personal. I think at my old job, when I was a little more hesitant to come out, really, I felt I could feel the relationships I was building weren't as strong as they could have been, where as my new company, I was out from day one, and these bonds I've built are unbreakable at this point. Peter, to you.
Thanks, Taylor. Sort of echoing Taylor, white male, tend to be straight passing. My other identities are more invisible ones. I work in mental health, and I also have lived experience with mental health. I did a TED Talk where I was very open about my experiences with very complex mental health issues. And a lot of people told me like, oh, that's really like out there, and like people can Google you and see that like you've struggled with this. And I was like, well, I don't really want to work for a place if they're gonna go see me being vulnerable like that and passionate and not want to employ me. I also have a not visible physical disability in that I have had chronic back issues for most of my life, and I need accommodations. And it's incredibly important to me to be able to do that in order to be able to do my job and to not be in constant pain. When it comes to advice on navigating the workforce, again, I like to ask a lot of questions around the environment and the culture to get a gauge of what is it going to be like, again, bringing those identities to the workplace. There was one place that I applied to, I was offered the job, but during the interview process, I asked this question, and thank God the manager was very open about the fact that upper management is very white, male, and it's kind of an older generation, and that it's not really a place where like you could telecommute or that you could have that flexibility. And that was like a yellow flag for me, that if you can't even in the 2010s be open about that, are you going to be open to me when I request a standing desk? Are you going to be open to me when I ask for a mental health day? So asking about those cultural aspects and kind of reading between the lines. I don't think any employer or hiring manager is going to say, oh yeah, we discriminate. Yeah. But you can definitely read between the lines. It's always great to ask questions during the interview, just from like a sense of, it looks good. I'm a hiring manager. It looks good when you ask questions. But if you ask thoughtful questions that pertain to how you are going to do personally in the workplace, you'll be able to get information that you can kind of read between the lines about what is that company's culture, what is that working environment like.
Awesome. Thank you for all of that advice. I think it's incredibly important for those that are listening today. We're going to go ahead and transition over to just our O&A. Panelists at this time, if you'd like to drop any of your contact information, your LinkedIn profile, email, whatever, into our chat for our participants to reach you later, now would be a really great time to do that. I'll go ahead and put the Career Services and SDSJ information on the screen. It looks like so far we've gotten one question. So if any of you want to tackle this one, feel free to just chime in. The question is, how do you recommend that folks advocate for themselves / community members if their employer is not showing up to support them in their identity?
Ooh, can I take this one first?
Of course.
So I work for the LGBT Chamber of Commerce in my state. And one thing that I'd recommend, because I have fought this fight before at many job sites and workplaces, is don't do it alone. There are organizations whose sole purpose it is to make employers more inclusive. So there's guidebooks out there. There's people who can give advice. I always think it speaks louder when you have another organization who's making these same recommendations. So of course, recommendations to your employer, your CEO, whoever makes that, but there are in all 50 states that I know of, there are Chamber of Commerce's, the Human Rights Campaign, and this is all free advice. So I would look to the experts so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, because when you're changing a workplace culture, no matter what the change is, there's always growing pains. So I would tell you to be prepared as possible.
I think that's excellent advice. Does anyone else have anything? Peter, it looks like you do.
Yeah, I recommend becoming familiar with your nearest chapter of the ACLU and the Disability Rights Center. Again, as Kat said, there are a lot of organizations, social justice organizations, that are out there. There are so many to name, where you can find members of different identity and community that can give you that advice, can offer that support. And sometimes it'll be strategies that you can use within your workplace, but also it might come to a point where you do need to contact some of those professional legal firms.
I'm going to jump in too. I would probably say kind of look at to the root as to why they're not supporting, I guess you could say. And you can kind of see based on that where the best route to go is to kind of get your employer involved. there might be times where it's a start of a conversation as to, hey, why don't we do these types of things? So talking to your direct leadership and then asking questions regarding other leaders within the system as to like community outreach and stuff like that, and what they have in place for different aspects of getting involved within different communities, and if there's any like any reason why they don't have certain things that would make you feel supported within your workplace.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any answers to this question? Great. So now that we only have about 2 minutes remaining, I want to first thank all of our panelists for joining us today. I know it's not always easy to hop on these calls, but also not always easy to talk about these things related to our identities and things of that nature. So I appreciate all of your honesty and transparency today. And of course, some of your jokes were quite magical. So thank you for that. Before we leave, if you all have anything else to say, feel free to unmute your mic and say any closing remarks. If not, we'll go ahead and end the recording in a few moments. And again, I appreciate your engagement today.
Just a quick thank you to Kevin. He's awesome.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, Kevin is pretty great. And then Kat, you had something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, because I apologize, I'm not sure if you all heard it before, what a non-discrimination statement is. If I recommend anybody does that, whether LGBTQ or not, what that is in an employee handbook is that thing, like I said, that says we agree to not discriminate against this, this, and this. That's actually a legally binding contract in all 50 states. So that means if you ever run into any trouble and you think that they're not treating you properly because you're a member of the LGBTQIA community, or because you're, a Black American, or any of those other things, you have legal recourse. Outside of my job, I do a nonprofit that does legislative activism. And the number one problem I find with discrimination, where I wish I could help people, is that their workplace So wherever you work, please look at that and please advocate a comprehensive one. And that is all my last words of wisdom. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And Gianni, I see you unmuted.
Oh, I just have fat fingers. That's all that is.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate your engagement.